When Mark Carney was elected our prime minister in April of last year, 9 months ago, I genuinely felt that he would be a bad prime minister for Canada. But I never imagined he would do some of the things he has done in the recent weeks. His latest poking in the eye of the United States, our largest trading partner, the largest economy in the world, our primary defender of our country militarily. We can't even shoot down a Chinese weather balloon. And here the prime minister believes that it's good strategy to repeatedly poke in the eye our best customer. His latest word salad about Canadians need to become our own best customer. Alberta is the largest exporter of cattle and beef products in Canada. Most of that export, like over 80% of it, goes to the United States. We cannot eat our way out of this problem. We are major exporters of other commodities. We cannot consume the potash fertilizer that is produced from Saskatchewan. We cannot consume the mines and minerals that our mines produce. We cannot consume the food, the grain products, the oil seeds, the durum, the barley, and so on, the pulse crops that our farmers produce. We cannot consume all of the 2x4s and 2x6s that our lumber mills produce. The fact that this prime minister thinks that, number one, it's sensible to poke your best customer, a customer that is the largest economy in the world, closest to us geographically, is a good idea. And that the solution to the problem is for us to consume all of our export products in an economy founded on exports is dangerous folly. What's also remarkable, in a good sense, is that Albertans are faced with a unique choice and opportunity. Prime Minister Carney is sinking the ship of Canada. That is obvious to any objective observer. He is imperiling our economy. He is continuing to rack up debt and deficit on a scale that's never occurred before, that burdens our children, burdens our grandchildren, makes the cost of living go up, drives inflation, and creates other economic hardship that are depriving Canadians, and in this case, of primary concern to me, Albertans, from having a prosperous life. So Albertans are faced with a unique time in history where we have before us an ongoing petition to require an independence referendum in October. That petition is going well. I'm going to comment more on that in a minute. But remember, we have a unique situation in Canada where our Supreme Court of Canada, in the 1998 Supreme Court of Canada reference decision on Quebec, has laid out a pathway for any province to seek independence. And it requires a province-wide vote on a clear question by a clear majority, and that triggers two pathways. One pathway to independence is where Alberta sits down with the other provinces and affected First Nations and the federal government and negotiates how much Alberta is going to pay for the 5 national parks, the 4 military bases, and the couple of federal prisons and a few other things that the federal government has here in Alberta, and how much the federal government's going to pay to transfer all of the pension entitlements that Albertans have paid into the Canadian pension plan, and so on, to negotiate those details, as well as what arrangement the First Nations would like to see for themselves under their treaties. The other scenario is, as recognized by the Supreme Court of Canada in paragraphs 154 and 155 of its decision, that it may be the case that the federal government may not fulfill their obligation for good faith negotiations and may engage in bad faith, may do underhanded things If you could imagine that. I mean, look at the ethical track record of this government. So the Supreme Court of Canada back in 1998 said, this does not preclude unconstitutional unilateral declaration of independence. Now, in order for that to be a viable pathway for any region or province around the world seeking to declare unilateral independence, is driven in large part by international acceptance. Because the whole notion of a nation state in our global world, in our modern world for the last few hundred years, is will other nations recognize it, right? Recognize a place as being a country. The United States has signaled from meetings that have been publicized by the Alberta Prosperity Project that the State Department's apparently indicated that the United States believes in the free will and self-determination of people and democratic processes, and that if Albertans decide that they want to be an independent country, that the United States would recognize that. And there's an understanding that there's many other countries around the world that would recognize that as well. One of those would be Israel, because keep in mind, there's a very recent precedent here for the concept of other countries unilaterally declaring the recognition of a new nation state. And the best example is Mark Carney himself in September of 2025 announced, without a vote in Parliament or any other blessing in a democratic way, that the government of Canada was unilaterally recognizing the independence of the state of Palestine, and in so doing caused hostages, Israeli hostages, to be held longer than they would have otherwise given the peace deal that was underway by the Trump administration. So the precedent is there, and one of the outcomes of a successful referendum vote in October is going to be over the ensuing period of months, and I'm thinking 2 or 3 months, because this is actually not as complicated as it may seem on its face. Because remember, all of the services that the Alberta government would need to take over from the federal government, the few services that the federal government actually provides, border services, military, currency, a few federal prisons, because most of the jails in Alberta are provincial, and so on, would passport offices already have processes in place, already have staffing in place. And much like when you see two companies merge and the employees go from working for one company, they keep their job, they keep doing the same function at their job, they're just getting paid by a different company, and they maybe get a different uniform or they get a different business card with a different logo on it. The same type of thing could occur. So we're in a unique situation where we're faced in a fork of the road where Carney and 10 years of Liberal rule have, to be blunt, destroyed the Canada that we all once knew and loved in so many ways and respects, and are taking us on an accelerated rate down this cliff over the edge. And so Albertans are going to have a choice. They're going to have a choice. Do they want to go down with this Canadian ship and its further slip into socialism and catastrophically stupid economic policies? Or do we want to renew our friendship, our everlasting relationship with our closest neighbor, geographically, culturally, the United States of America? Now, there's increasing discussion coming out of the United States in their legacy media by Trump administration officials and others, social media influencers, about the situation in Alberta. There seems to be recognition that Alberta is saying, we don't think it's a good idea to poke our best customer in the eye. We recognize that our trade patterns here in Alberta are not east-west. They're north-south into the United States. We recognize that our cultural origins are from the United States. You get this occasional peripheral talk from social media influencers in the U.S. like, oh, Alberta's going to become the 51st state. No, we're not. And it doesn't matter if I wanted that, and I don't. It's not going to happen. And there's a very practical reason why it can't happen. In the United States, the Congress would have to vote to agree to bring in Alberta as the 51st state. Democrats would have to vote in favor of it, too, to get the required number of votes for the thresholds. However, the Democrats have been clear that they want Washington, D.C., which is currently not a state, and they want Puerto Rico, which is a territory and not a state, to become states. And so they would say, we will agree to Alberta becoming a state if you, the Republicans, agree to Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico becoming a state. Here's the problem that is obvious to anybody who studies the allocation of electoral power in the United States, which is Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico are blue. In other words, they're Democratic. And given the number of seats they would get in Congress, in the two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives, it would distort the electoral power balance in the United States and could potentially preclude the Republicans from ever holding power again. So it's a complete non-starter. As much as President Trump likes to muse and say provocative things, the simple electoral math doesn't work. Alberta cannot become the 51st state, and those who are calling for the independence of Alberta are not calling for Alberta to become the 51st state. We want to become an independent, free country where we can achieve our potential, we can release our resources, we can stop these insane policies and ideological extremism from Ottawa, where we can get Ottawa's knee off our neck and build a happy and prosperous future for our children and our grandchildren. We know we have the capability to do it. We've just got to get out from underneath the thumb of Ottawa, and we're posed with the uniquest opportunity in history, combined with the legal pathway that the Supreme Court of Canada has laid out, combined with the opportunity for independence recognition from the United States and a couple of other dozen countries around the world. So there's that. Now, you will have seen the long lineups for people to sign the petition. And that's inspiring. I've again had an opportunity to talk to many of the people at the different locations across the province that have been in these lineups, and they all say the same thing. The hope, the excitement, the steely determination, and the phrase so often heard, I'm doing this for my kids, or I'm doing this for my grandkids. So that's terrific. But you're going to start to see the lineups subside and almost disappear. And the reason is, the only person who can witness your signature when you sign the petition is a canvasser who's been vetted and approved and has a canvasser badge with a number on it and identification from Elections Alberta. Elections Alberta has to approve the canvassers. And there's been a backlog, but there's now hundreds and hundreds of canvassers approved, and there'll be hundreds and hundreds more approved in the coming weeks. The goal is to get up to thousands of canvassers. You'll have seen it, like the Edmonton event, they might have had 4 people, canvassers signing, and you'll now see the photograph from an event in Cochrane, and there's 14 canvassers there. So I noticed, I can't remember where it was. I think it was Airdrie. They just had a drive-through system set up. Someone set it up so you just pull up in your vehicle. They had pylons, safety vests, all that stuff was completely well organized, and you didn't even have to get out of your car. You had to show your identification, and the canvasser ensured that you properly completed your signature. So it's going to get easier and easier to sign, and you're going to see canvassers in more and more locations. Permanent storefronts are opening up. They're open Monday to Friday or Monday to Saturday, set hours so you can go in. So the critical thing is we get as many Albertans as possible to understand the dangerous course we're on under the reckless leadership of Mark Carney and his new government Liberals, which are the same as the old government Liberals, and the incredible opportunity that Alberta has to become the freest, most prosperous, independent country in the world.